The former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, has died suddenly at the age of 69. A passionate campaigner for Scottish independence, he's been described tonight as a monumental figure of politics.
There is shock here in Scotland at the sudden death of Alex Salmond. There have been tributes paid from across the political spectrum, and tonight the King said Alex Salmond's devotion to Scotland drove his decades of public service.
Good evening. Alex Salmond, Scotland's former First Minister and a formidable campaigner for Scottish independence, has died. He was aged 69 and collapsed after giving a speech in North Macedonia. As leader of the Scottish National Party, Alex Salmond took the SNP into power at Holyrood in 2007, but stood down after the independence referendum in 2014. Among the many tributes, John Swinney, Scotland's First Minister, praised his contribution to political life and said he led Scotland so close to becoming an independent country. Tonight, the King said Alex Salmond's devotion to Scotland drove his decades of public service. Lorna Gordon is in Glasgow now. Lorna, you knew him. What was he like?
Well, Alex Salmond was a big beast of Scottish politics, and tonight the flags are flying at half-mast across at the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. He was Scotland's fourth First Minister. It's hard to overstate his importance. Alex Salmond was the politician who took Scotland close to becoming an independent country. In 300 years, no one came closer to ending Scotland's union with England than Alex Salmond.
This, in my estimation, has been the greatest campaign in Scottish democratic history. And a formidable political figure who guided a party that for decades was on the fringes of politics to the heart of power, changing the political landscape of the United Kingdom and delivering a referendum on independence.
This is desperately sad news that Alex Salmond has died, and I extend my deepest condolences to his wife Moira and to his family. This is a moment that individuals will reflect on the exceptional leadership and contribution that Alex Salmond has given to public life in Scotland, with his service in the House of Commons and in the Scottish Parliament, and especially as the First Minister of Scotland.
It was while studying economics at St Andrews University that Alex Salmond joined the SNP. He worked for a time as an oil economist, but politics soon exerted its pull.
The MP for Banff-and-Buchan, Alex Salmond, has won the leadership of the Scottish National Party.
Mr Salmond first led the SNP in the 1990s, but it was during his second stint that his party became a major political force.
Well, folks, it's good to be back.
Within 3 years, the SNP were in government in Edinburgh. Then in 2011, he pulled off a feat that was thought impossible, winning a majority at Holyrood. Alex Salmond negotiated the referendum on independence with the then Prime Minister David Cameron. He was a formidable and inescapable voice in the debate that followed, on the airwaves and in towns and cities across Scotland. In the end, the referendum result was no. Alex Salmond stepped down as First Minister and SNP leader, later carrying on the fight for independence with a new political party, Alba.
I was talking to somebody, it so happens the other day, who was telling me the story of Alec as a 24-year-old sitting next to a colleague in the Royal Bank of Scotland, outlining his strategy for achieving independence for Scotland. And I think he thought about that every day of his life since being a young man, and nearly brought it to fruition.
In more recent years, there were controversies. He was cleared of sexual assault in 2020, and he also fell out with his protégé and successor as First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. Tonight, she said, "I cannot pretend that the events of the past few years which led to the breakdown of our relationship did not happen. However, it remains the fact that for many years Alex was an incredibly significant figure in my life. He was my mentor, and for more than a decade we formed one of the most successful partnerships in UK politics." The former MP and MSP died after being taken ill in North Macedonia. It's understood he collapsed after giving a speech. Alex Salmond led the SNP to political dominance in Scotland and pushed independence to the top of the agenda. An orator, strategist and campaigner whose voice travelled far beyond the boundaries of Scotland. Well, you know, you look back at 2014 and you really did see his formidable campaigning powers when he was out on the streets campaigning people, person by person, voter by voter, to move towards independence. And he went, his party and he and his colleagues fighting for independence went from around a third of the electorate to 45% in that vote a decade ago. 45% of people here in Scotland voted in favour of Scottish independence. He was a charismatic individual. He was charming, but he was also quite a tricky person, not least to interview. You'd always feel that he was several steps ahead in any interview. You saw the strategy, the calculations he was making as he answered his question. You saw that in his politics too, when he negotiated with David Cameron for that independence referendum. The wording of the question ultimately came down to Alex Salmond. He played his cards very well during that campaign. You get a sense of what a politician he was, that even those across the political divide have tonight been paying tribute to him. Sir Keir Starmer said he was a monumental figure. Boris Johnson has called him the great political disruptor of his age. Tonight, Scotland is absorbing, though, the news that Alex Salmond has died suddenly across in North Macedonia, and I think there will be far more reflections on what he contributed to politics here in Scotland in the days to come.
Indeed. Lorna Gordon, thank you. Well, our political editor, Chris Mason, is here. And Chris, well, your reflections then?
You know, when you walk up the stairwell of Bute House, the official residence of the First Minister of Scotland in Edinburgh, looking back at you are the occupiers of that role, First Minister, over the last quarter of a century or so. Whenever I've walked up that staircase, I've never been in any doubt as to which of those office holders was the most consequential. And his political consequence extended beyond Scotland. For no one in the last half century has come as close as Alex Salmond did to recasting, remoulding the very boundaries and borders of and within our islands, redrawing the map of the UK, potentially, turning a lifelong zeal for Scottish independence from a sidebar to the mainstream and to within a whisker of it happening. And, you know, for all of the arguments that we have in politics, there's perhaps no one more fundamental than where the frontier of the state lies. And he, Alex Salmond, personified a movement that came closer to changing that than any other in the modern era. Now, he never managed it. He said the dream shall never die the day after the referendum in 2014, but he reshaped Scottish politics in the way that we can still feel now. Yes, his former party, the SNP, have shrivelled at Westminster compared with where they were, but the Scottish nation still remains pretty much split down the middle on that big constitutional question. A final thought, Lorna touched on this. I've been really struck tonight that the fulsome nature of the tributes from his political opponents as well as his allies, extending beyond the usual warm words to a sort of deep respect for his ability. Alex Salmond was a primary colours politician. He was colourful, he was complicated, and yes, he was controversial, but above all, he was a man of consequence.